Alright, I guess we'll finish up. Yay! So, we're basically discussing, reality with other human beings, atheists, who, yes, God is dead, and with God they killed the notion, the idea of value. So they're value nihilists, or value relativist, which is the same thing as a value nihilist, because the value relativist is basically saying there is no value that can be discerned with any kind of reliability. Can't be distinguished, can't be understood, can't be discovered because it doesn't really exist. This is basically their argument. And so it's just some sort of subjective thing. Like whether you like chocolate ice cream or vanilla ice cream is the same as saying Holocaust bad, eating ice cream good. Those two comparisons are the same. You can't tell the difference. It's subjective, emotional reaction. There's no logic to be applied. And you, as a sentient being, have acquired no information by having sensations. So, about a couple hours ago, I was having a bad period. Anxiety. It was not healthy at all. And, it's informative. Because you say, ooh, this is really bad. It tells you something. This is not a good sensation. This is not feeling well. This is absolutely horrible. And you're made well aware that this is a valuable thing. That this is something that would be so cool if we could get rid of this capacity to be sensually bludgeoned by horrible sensations. And yet we're not supposed to be informed by that experience. That experience is not supposed to inform us about what sentience is like. It's somehow, no conclusions can be drawn. It's just amazing. So anyway, and then, the context also is here. Is that, again, the real comparison is to point out is that they have totally ignored the fact that what causes you sensations are different than the sensations. The sensations are different than the causes. They're not tied to the causes in any manner that is necessary. There's no necessary connection between cause and the effect. The effect is what we're talking about having value. The effect is the feeling itself, its very nature. And as soon as you describe something as suffering or pain, you're describing it as a category of sensation, and a category we can fully understand and put in good and bad slots very easily. Sensations that are obnoxious and sensations that are comforting. We know the difference, we can tell the difference, we can understand the difference, and we know the difference has value. And it's just silly not to recognize what's fundamental and intrinsic to the sensations themselves. They scream it. I can't avoid hearing it when I'm having the sensations. I am perfectly aware of their character. I don't have to think about it. I'm feeling it. No thought required. It tells me exactly. Repulsion. It says it loudly. It doesn't even say it in words, but it says it in feeling. You can't get any more direct. You can't get any closer to a fact than something. Water doesn't even scream wet as loud as a bad feeling screams repulsive, or a repulsive feeling screams bad. The connection is so solid, and yet these lunatics choose to not be enlightened by their own sentient experiences. Tisk, tisk, tisk.
It's an interesting question. I think that the universe probably would be better if there were more things that I value in it. At least I would find it to be. Wouldn't you?
More things that I value in it. That's not the question. The question is, obviously, the question is you know that you're going to have the things you don't value in it, the things you don't think are good. The nasty bits will be included. The subject's about the value of the nasty bits versus the value of the silly bits, the silly happy bits. argument is that if you really take a fair look at them, and if you fairly understood what the price was for your comforting breath of fresh air, and how many organisms died to produce it, died struggling, squirming, spinning around in circles, all kinds of horrible things happening to them, blood coming out of places and such, that you would not you would not choose, if it was your consciousness, if it had to experience the whole total of what was being experienced to create your experience. If you mixed all the colors together, it would be such a foul shade of brown, you would not want to be near it. How much time, why don't you tell me how many minutes, how many milliseconds of your life you've actually spent contemplating the non-existent Saturnites and lamenting the fact that they're not loving and telling the truth.
If there were, at some point, historically, Saturnites who were honest, loving beings, and they all decided to end their own existence, I would find that terribly sad.
Right, even though they were committing world wars regularly, enslaved their people, had a whole biosphere of sentient creatures that were dying in grotesque amounts. Some organisms, 1,000 babies die for every one that lives to be a year old. Oh, the humanities.
Wouldn't it be the Saturnity?
The constellation of values. And now it's a constellation. And this philosophy, right, he lives in the world where there's a constellation of value.
Criticizing words you don't know what they mean?
Well, I know what constellation is. Yeah, but whatever, who cares? You know. And it's reductio absurdum.
Reductio ad absurdum.
Who cares? You know, really? Yeah, who cares? There's absolutely nothing absurd about the rational process of dissection.
You don't know what that means either, do you?
Choosing fail-safe is absurd.
Timestamp, please.
Conclusion. That's what he called it. He called it an absurd conclusion. And then said, I'm not dismissing it out of hand.
Let's go to the videotape.
Yeah, you said choosing to end life would be absurd. It's an absurd reaction. That's what you called it. Timestamp anybody you want to. It's towards the end of his video, obviously.
But you play right after this, which is not what I said. Schopenhauer and Kierkegaard specifically that do affirm that. So I don't want to dismiss out of hand or make fun of someone as an antinatalist or something like that.
I'll just say that their conclusion is absurd.
Those aren't contradictory.
Yes, they are. I mean, as I will explain. Yeah. I mean, you're going to play the clip where I explain how it's absurd for you to think you can call somebody's thoughtful, hard opinions absurd and not be offensive? Do you really believe that's reasonable? You go up to Dawkins and say, Mr. Dawkins, sir, I think your whole evolutionary theory is absurd. I think you're a silly person. Yeah, right, sure. Sure, that'll work. I'm sure he won't be offended.
There's a difference between antinatalism and antinatalists. I could say that all sorts of isms are ridiculous. It doesn't mean that I want to shit on every person who affirms the various isms that I disagree with or that I think are absurd.
So I don't know what did that just mean? So antinatalist and antinatalism are different things. And is there any point in even doing this shit? Yeah, I guess if they vote the right way, but whatever.
They're not mutually exclusive statements.
Well, I think they are, in the sense that I don't think you could reach the conclusion that life shouldn't be continued and not be an antinatalist. So I think that would be absurd.
I like that much better. Schopenhauer would he'd love for you to say his conclusion is absurd. He'd find that, oh yeah, thank you. What a compliment. Appreciate it.
The argument is not identical to the man. This is what...
Well, whatever. I mean, it's just, again, every man, okay, who has constructed his argument or constructed his beliefs and has any sense of his own integrity, is going to, especially if they're going to be aggressively advocating for something, they're going to find the characterization of absurd not complimentary. Yeah, okay.
The ad hominem fallacy is a fallacy. If the argument were identical to the man, then the ad hominem fallacy would not be a fallacy. Fact of the matter is, I'm willing to criticize a conclusion, and I don't really care whether or not it hurts somebody's feelings.
Well, it's not anybody's feelings you're hurting. You're anti-natalist. You're saying you don't want to be, you're not dismissing the argument. You say the argument has weight, and at the same time you call it absurd. I'm just saying that your contradictions are showing, okay, not ours.
Feelings. That doesn't mean that I'm going to run around saying that antinatalists are idiots. I said that it is a position that has some philosophical weight. I said that I, in the first person...
Well, it doesn't have any philosophical weight if you believe it, because then you're absurd, right? So it only has philosophical weight as something you dismiss, because if you believe it, you're absurd. I mean, sorry, this is pathetic.
Find the conclusion to be absurd. Those are radically different statements. I have good friends who believe things that I regard to be absurd. I think we all probably do.
But that's not the substance of your contradiction. The contradiction is if you believe it, you're absurd. You can't get around that. The way the argument, if believed, is absurd. That's the chain of your logic. You built it. I'm just describing it.
Be articulated with some weight, yet I don't pay any attention to that because, fuck it, who cares?
I didn't say fuck it, who cares?
You said it was absurd, right, exactly. Oh, fuck, there's just no point.
It's not the point at all, so that I don't buy it. Right?
Yeah, that you don't buy it, and you rolled your eyes, and then later, as right now, you said it's absurd. So you said, I don't buy it in a mocking way, and then you said it's absurd. So, there you go.
If something has a tradition behind it, which is what I mean when I say it can be articulated with some weight. It can be...
only be if it has a tradition. So I guess the Bible can be stated with some weight. But the weight isn't its logical character, its integrity as evidence. It's anything a rational person would conclude to be valuable. It's only irrational weight. So at least we've got that tied down. When you say an argument has philosophical weight, you mean it just has popular support. Oh.
Be argued, right? Just because a thing can be argued doesn't mean that I'm under any obligation to buy it or find it persuasive.
The point is you're not allowed to say it has philosophical weight and imply it has some sort of philosophical integrity, which weight would imply, and then say it's absurd. Yeah, that's a contradiction.
Christianity can be argued. Christianity can be articulated with some weight.
Well, I don't believe it can. I don't think it can be argued with any weight whatsoever, not even a single ounce of evidentiary or rational or reasonable weight. It is clearly storytelling. It's clearly nonsense. It has no coherent connection to anything in the evidential record. It's just absolutely babbling bullshit. It might as well be, gold engraved, the story of the three pigs. It might as well be. It has just as little credible hope of being anything near the truth.
Doesn't mean that I have to be a Christian doesn't mean that I believe it, right?
If you don't get...
Well, do you necessarily believe the three pigs or Goldilocks or Little Red Riding Hood? Because they're all fucking stories of just as much credibility as the silly Bible.
Get a gooey feeling for it, then there's no point in talking about it. So if I don't take all legislation and all theoretical science and put little ribbons on it so you can get emotional about it, there's no point in talking about it.
I am currently talking about it.
You're not. You're conceding the argument that you're not talking about it in a serious manner. All right? That you have no capacity to sit there and even imagine that, well, if you're correct that value does originate with feeling organisms, then your conclusions are perfectly sound, and I have to concede that you have every sensible right to act on them, because that's what I would do if I rationally believed something wrong was happening, there was victims that needed rescuing. I, too, would say, let's rescue the victims. But you're not saying that. You're saying it's absurd.
Wow. Ooh. Phew. Yeah, that's a big one. Yeah, no profound bells are ringing.
Oh, you should have played the... You didn't let me read the Nietzsche quote. The silly little Nietzsche quote, which I probably can remember. Let's see. No, any man who's after happiness is just a silly English cunt. Something like that. Only a silly English cunt could want to be happy, or something like that. That is so fucking profound. Just... yeah. Wow.
Saying it doesn't give you a gooey feeling inside, and therefore we shouldn't talk about it?
I don't know. I don't see that it has... I don't have anything to say on the subject of Englishmen versus Germans in terms of either one being my kind of folk.
It's a fair cop kind of description if you have to pigeonhole us.
Again, at no point in the video that you're talking about.
I mean, he just took out the pigeonhole us as negative utilitarians. That's a reasonable pigeonhole. That's what I said. Reasonable. So, yeah, wow. Slice and dice.
Did I say a single thing about anything that you thought, and in fact explicitly?
I mean, just you know, I don't mind people doing this, you know, play my video thing. But he's not playing the clips completely. He's cutting clips out, okay? So there's a whole context that he's not playing. So let's understand that he's not being fair to the content. He is, by his discretion, dissecting it into little pieces. So let's recognize that, the assholes who say, well, you're just getting what you do. This is quite different from what I do.
He said that I wasn't going to be talking about anything that you thought.
Even though we never asked you to do that, thank you very much. But if you have to do it,
I think I just said we, right? So I'm talking about anti-natalists again, not me. Anti-natalists.
it certainly would be the rational terminology. But a will, people, anti-natalists believe in a will to be happy.
Didn't say that I believe that antinatalists believe in a will to be happy. Said that the antinatalist arguments that I've seen, including the ones that you've advanced right now, actually, suffering is bad, it should be avoided, and there is a calculus by which we can talk about the reduction of suffering. And the willful choice to stop reproducing is a way to totally end suffering, right?
Right, fail safe. Doesn't have anything to do with that little happy word.
Yeah. Is that a wrong paraphrase of what you said, of what you have been saying so far?
It's not relevant to your commentary that somehow anti-natalists are worried about happiness, when what they're worried about is the expense of the project.
That emerges from within a utilitarian framework. So when I say the utilitarians in a certain form, I believe I say, utilitarians in a certain form, or the classical utilitarians, claim that we want to be happy and we want to reduce.
Again, like I say, if we would have just played the whole clip, this would have been clarified, right? It was about me conceding, look, you want to use utilitarian, that's your business, but yeah, let's use the negative utilitarian because that's more accurately describes the community.
suffering. And then I problematize the issue of happiness. The point is to problematize the classical utilitarian frame through which one might arrive at the kinds of conclusions that you are getting at. He didn't say that you're using that frame.
That's really a little bit excessive, isn't it? Hey, knock it off. I mean, what is that hysteria? Air cleaner's dirty, I think. I don't know what his problem is. But man, I'm not pleased. This chair isn't working right either. And what else can I complain about while I'm here complaining? Yeah, back to it, sorry.
In fact, I explicitly said, again, that I wasn't going to be addressing any of your arguments.
Right, you're just going to be insulting people who believe in the philosophy of antinatalism and then pigeonholing them into a categorization they might find irritating and annoying. So yeah, fine. That's all your only contribution here is to malign and degrade and mischaracterize. Bravo, mission accomplished.
He considers antinatalism a rash conclusion because, there's obviously so much that the human race has demonstrated its magnificence. It's right on the brink of being so fucking brilliant.
Whether or not, I think I used the word radical, but you might be right, I might have used the word rash, whether or not the human race is brilliant does not make antinatalism not a rash claim. Pardon the double negative.
Well, I think it does, and certainly in the context of it's certainly not rash if people were talking about it 100 years ago or 200 years ago or even 2,000 years ago, and that the conversation is now only more substantially evidence-based in the sense that we can now bury gods and bury nonsense and recognize that this is basically what evolution does, which is make a fucking goddamn mess for no good reason.
Doesn't seem to me that they have any connection whatsoever.
We're right on the edge. It's a rash conclusion to say it isn't working.
It's not a rash conclusion to say it isn't working.
Well, and especially in the context, again, this might be a moot point, okay, if we're still using bows and arrows. But no, we have dropped nuclear bombs. We are indicating the human race has no intention to grow up, and that we are on the brink of complete and utter horror. Just showing right up. I mean, we're going to be right there any minute now. So it's time for action, not caution. It's time to do something because you're out of time.
In fact, I affirm that. That's true. It isn't working. So what?
So what? Again, I just don't understand. If somebody tells me something's not working, the toaster is threatening to burn the house down, unplug it. Seems obvious. Yeah.
Rash conclusion is that the solution to that problem is, therefore, to die out as a species.
Yeah, I mean, come on, get serious.
Well, like I said, many antinatalists would say the rational thing to do is to die out as a mechanism, the life thing, that no good will come of it.
And you coerce it. It's a goddamn blob. No, you're imposing it. It's an imposition. It isn't a fucking coercion. You're not making a deal.
All right. How can you impose something on it? I mean, it's a goddamn blob, as you put it. The issues that I'm bringing up with the notion of coercion...
Well, whatever. I mean, this is just... Again, I don't want to get into that argument again. I mean, we know what the blob turns into. This is not a mystery. We know exactly how the blob happens. We know what the blob grows into. We know what the blob is vulnerable to have happen to it. So you have to consider the entirety of the consequence, not just the car hitting the front bumper, but the fact that the car will smash the engine compartment and shove the steering wheel into the other guy's face. You have to consider the whole accident, not just a teeny piece of the accident.
Also work with the word imposition, right? I don't know if you've noticed, but coercion isn't about making deals, it's about the exact opposite of that.
You're physically...
No, it isn't. It's about a contract that you manipulate through some sort of distortion of a fair negotiation. You know, that's coercive in that it creates a pressure.
Be building it and shoving it into the world.
And the problem is that in all, I mean, I said this about coercion, you can say it about imposition, right? In all cases where I would use the word imposition, I impose X on someone or something, that thing already has to exist. It has to already be in the world.
Well, again, so I can't impose pollution on the future by just, all I have to do is dump the pollution in a container that won't release the pollution for a few hours, and now I haven't imposed the pollution because it didn't happen to something right now, sentient right now. But again, we know what babies grow into, so let's not play games. I mean, if you make a puppy, you know you're making a dog. There's no doubt about what it'll turn into, is there? If you farm puppies, you know you're making dogs, right?
So I don't know what it means to impose something on a non-person. The change in word doesn't affect...
Right. So again, so you don't know about the fact that you can have a consequence, like I could impose in terms of having a selfish disregard for human life. And so I could work at a nuclear power plant, not do some engineering thing the way it was supposed to be done, and in 10 years the plant melts down. And even though I was totally malicious and willful in my compromise of the structure, you wouldn't say I imposed the failure. I imposed all the pain and suffering that took place because of exactly what I did on purpose, with volition and knowledge. And yet I didn't impose it. Somebody poisons food and somebody doesn't buy the poison, poisons pills, let's say, like the Tylenol thing. Somebody doesn't buy it for 2 years. I didn't impose it anymore because it happened in the future.
Affect anything here.
Procreation will create adult organisms.
Yep, infant mortality rate is 0.
No, that's not the argument. We're saying it's probabilistic. This is what can be expected. No one's making any other argument than that there's no way to become an adult human than to be procreated. So even if you had 99% attrition, you'd still have 100% connection between the adult and procreation. The adult isn't created through any other mechanism.
The pressure you're placing on something that's going to change their destiny. So it's a coercion of, and again, you can't get more in somebody's face than to make their face.
Right, so again, the point is you have to use this language that you change something's destiny by force. There is no destiny beforehand. It doesn't make sense to talk about changing something's destiny.
Well, influencing, it doesn't really matter. It's an imposition. We understand we're calling it willful because we're saying these are impositions created by willful acts of human beings where they've said, I'm actually going to procreate on purpose. I'm going to create a human being. So that's the context of this conversation. So it's just absolute nonsense to say there's some disconnection from that mechanism of willful taking the risk with somebody else's welfare. It's a willful act, no less willful than if I went into my neighbor's house, stole his money, and went to Las Vegas and said, I'm going to win him some money. It's no different. The imposition is just as real. I'm going to end up rolling dice that are going to change his destiny. That's a fact.
The fact of the matter is that giving birth to something is a very particular case. And I think that the language breaks down when you begin to talk about imposing things onto non-entities.
Well, it just, again, there's just no point in this silly argument about the non-entity when we know the only way it becomes an entity is through this act. You cannot be an entity any other way than through this aggressive action of stealing its card stock and drawing straws for it.
Or coercing non-entities into existence, however you want to phrase it.
Stealing their right to be left alone. That's another way I'd phrase it. Ignoring their right, their what's the right way to put it? Their future will to have been left alone.
At the very least, the present.
Oh, right. And we have no clue what's going to happen. The baby probably is just going to be a cup of water.
I didn't say that we didn't have any clue what was going to happen to the baby.
Oh, yes, you implied that somehow it's a mystery, that there's infant mortality, and that'll take care of the problem. No, there's a direct correlation between the adults that exist and the people who created them. Direct correlation. Human beings are not made by any other activity than procreation.
In fact, the entire time, I didn't argue from consequences. Why? Because I'm not a consequentialist. Haven't argued.
Well, I don't even know what that means in context. So, yes, you're a value nihilist, and you don't believe in determinism? I don't know. You don't believe in cause and effect? I don't know.
From consequences in this video, didn't argue from consequences in the last video. In fact, if you can find me one example of me arguing from consequences, please give me the timestamp.
Arguing from consequences. I guess I just don't know what you mean by that. So sorry. Yes, you've over my headed that there's some possibility other than cause and effect. There's something other than consequences to be measured. What is all that fucking beepy shit? Somebody's Skyping. I'll have to go see what it is. Yes, it'll be fun. iPad.
And you're just like, why the fuck am I talking to people this fucking...
Don't need that yet. Oh, look at that. Little Christian is leaving me messages. Gee, I'm so excited. I was talking to Andy, douchebag. Yeah, like that matters. I was talking about silly value nihilists who might as well be dumber than a 6-year-old because they're talking shit even a 6-year-old can figure out is shit. Go ahead, try to convince a 6-year-old that, his tummy ache isn't bad. Go ahead.
You shouldn't even be allowed to say the word Schopenhauer and then pretend you don't know that babies turn into human beings.
When did I say that I don't know that babies turn into human beings?
You are disassociating the action of procreation with the end result of sentient human being in shit. That's the disconnection. It's pretty clear you're trying to disconnect the two activities, procreation and adult in shit.
Timestamp, please. I mean, you're staring at the video. Just what timestamp is that? Because it's not in there anywhere.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I'm not really staring at the video at the moment, so I'm really not going to do this timestampy shit.
The ontology thing, epistemology thing, whatever crap.
Words are hard.
It's a very complex amount of stuff happening.
I don't know. The words is hard. It's, again, some of them are difficult. You should see how people have pronounced my name. I mean, just amazing. But does that mean something? No, I don't think it does. I think we know. I mean, obviously, concepts are hard for you. So maybe I'll just say that. Concepts are hard. Value. Good, bad. Me no can figure outy. Yeah.
So because there's a lot of stuff between turning the key and the car running, you're going to say you can't see the connection, or you can only see connections that are very quick in time?
Didn't say anything like that.
Well, it seems like that's what you're trying to say. You're trying to say there's no connection, no direct connection between the act of procreation and the 6-year-old who dies of cancer. You're saying there's no real connection between those two activities. And I'm saying there's an obvious direct connection between the horror imposed and the imposer.
Again, timestamp, please.
He's one of these value relativist assholes. He thinks people just make up value. There's no such thing as child molesting being bad, and there's no such thing as harm being a bad thing, because sometimes harm is perfectly good because you make lots of money off of it. So if you can torture one slave and make 100 people really happy by torturing him, it's a deal, man, no problem.
There is not one point in here where I talked about relativism, or I implied relativism.
Well, nihilism is the
or
same
anything
thing.
like that.
Same thing.
Fact of the matter, though, isn't like 20 minutes ago when I said, I value things like love and compassion and kinship, whatever, anything else that I value. Didn't you say, like, oh, you value that, and you're expecting all of us to value that? How are you not a relativist? Or at least in that moment, are you not contradicting what you're saying right now?
No, I'm saying the only thing that's of universal value, which all things have to value, is sentient feelings. They don't have to value anything else in the universe. They just have to value the welfare of a sentient being. They have to account for their impact on its welfare. That's what they have to account for. If they can spare it from trouble, if they can prevent it experiencing harm, if they can in any way change the equation that enhances the welfare of sentient life in the future, then the obligation exists. That's what I'm saying. Yes, sentient welfare trumps everything.
Fact of the matter is that you're relativizing certain values when you find it convenient, and you're not relativizing other values when you do find it convenient. So,
Bullshit. I'm saying my nonsensical joys of whacking off or doing this or doing that are just as useless as your senseless joys in the face of obscene horror. If obscene horror is going to be the price of those, it's no deal, whether it's mine or whether it's yours. So I'm not being unfair. I'm saying there's only one thing you have to value, and that is sentient experience.
I'd like you to sketch out some kind of heuristic for telling us what kind of values you feel like are arbitrary for other people to espouse.
All values that aren't appreciative of the value of sentient welfare. So if you value diamonds for some other reason than their effect on sentient creatures, if you value anything in the fucking universe for some other reason than its impact on sentient creatures, its ability to help them feel better, if you don't value it for that reason, it's crap. It's a crap value.
Versus the values that you espouse, which are not relativistic. See,
I've just pointed out how they all are relativistic. The fact that what I derive pleasure from, what fantasies I have, what is all crap. It means nothing. The only thing that means something is that I am sentient and I will have a welfare. That is all that matters. I will exist in a certain level of comfort, and I will experience certain experiences that will degrade the status of that thing in the end. And in the end, there's a color this all makes. And if it makes a blue color, it's good, blue-green. And if it's red something else, then it's bad, It's not that complicated.
Seems to be a totally, again, arbitrary judgment.
It's not totally arbitrary in the sense that the two extremes are easily understood. The two things on the two sides of the fence are really easy to categorize. Okay, there is this blob of shit that's down the middle somewhere, but we certainly know that concentration camps and slavery and plague and all kinds of influenza, all kinds of things are on that side of the fence, the suck side, and other things like I don't know, comfy chair are on this good side. And we can do that. We can figure out which things are not on the fence and what side of the fence they fall on. And we can do that for 90% of the crap. And so let's do it with the 90%. And we'll just leave the 10% alone because it's wobbling in the middle of nowhere.
And one more thing. Didn't you say that you meant the word value at the beginning of the video, that you meant the word value in an amoral sense?
No. How could I possibly mean value in an amoral sense? I'm saying that the word moral has no meaning in an intelligent conversation, because the word is directly and indissectibly attached to the poopy organs of religion, okay, and dogma. This isn't a moral statement like there is an edict. Okay, all there is a recognition of value, creation in the sentient experience. It doesn't create a morality. It certainly creates logical oughts. Good, good, bad, bad. Make more good, make less bad. Not too complicated.
What is the value of this thing? What is the exchange of this thing? What is the cost-benefit analysis in relation to this thing?
And again, most of those equations are really not that difficult. Most are not complicated. Most.
Because the concept of values within the context of a moral framework is radically different than the context of values within the framework of an economic system.
Well, says you. I'm saying there is no such thing as any... The word moral is useless, and everything is a cost-to-benefit analysis. Everything that has meaning must be subjected to and survive cost-to-benefit analysis. To be a good thing, it must be understood to be good by cost-to-benefit analysis.
So this is an equivocation. And again, you're back to this moment of, no, don't call this a moral argument.
Yeah, no equivocation on my part. No, I didn't even open the moral door a crack. So you're full of shit, as usual.
But I'm going to use all these moral terms in their moral senses when it's convenient.
I don't use moral terms, and I don't use them. I only use them when somebody else injects them into the conversation, and I'm obliged to play the game in their field. But otherwise, I always attempt to migrate understanding to the concept of value and its creation, not the concept of authority telling you what is or isn't. It's a logical conclusion based on evidence. Value is evident, in my opinion. Value is evident. Anyway. So that was preposterously not that much fun. I salute your stamina, says the crazy psychotic. Jesus. Enjoy the debate. Let's see what deterministic one. He says he objects when I say, gee, you sometimes say things I think it's just absolute crap. But let's see what he says. Just because something has the tradition behind it, which is what I meant to say, it can be articulated with some weight. Tradition has no weight. Well, that's good. Very good. Christianity can be argued with some weight. Christianity cannot be argued with any weight. We agree on those. So yay for that. Alright. Best I've seen from Hothliday. Yeah, well, Hothliday is another individual with way too much shit, including his head, up his ass. Can you do a video on what is religion? Oh boy, that's just too fascinating. Let's see. Never saw a snarky suicide for Signaloid video response before. Seems scary. Pushed your buttons. Yes, I certainly did, didn't I? Yeah, cool. Anyway. Are you going to read from a script? It would be helpful to post the script in the description box. I don't think he was going to read. Well, I guess he read some sort of script. Yeah, I don't know what that little bit was, but he kind of just smashed right through it. So anyway, I had a feeling he'd respond to that video. That's right, I respond to my critics, and the critics of the rational philosophies of the world. I will defend rational philosophizing on planet Earth whenever it is attacked by flabby douche-tards. Yeah. Alright, so I think we're done. Excellent. I think I have time to spare, right? Oh, I have 5 whole more minutes. I could just bibble-babble along. I don't think there's anybody else to mock and ridicule. So, job well done, Gary. I was a bit humorous and engaging, yet not too overtly disgusting, so I think I have the right balance in these videos. Right balance of repartee and such. Repertoire. Can't say that word right either. I don't say a lot of words quite right. But I don't think that matters too much. Anyway, could read Christian PMs. Yeah, that might be funny. Let's do that. No, I won't bother doing that, but it would be funny. Alright. Where is my... Let's see where my comments are here. Let's see if there's any new comments of interest. Drum roll. Okay. Why do you insist that I'm relativist? Doesn't matter. Nihilist, relativist, doesn't really matter. The point is, you say we make it up. You say the individual subjectively does. You made the whole subjectivist argument right out of Nietzsche. So, I mean, I don't, what's the point? So you're either a value nihilist or a value relativist, and as I've argued, the two things are exactly the same. You annihilate value unless you're going to say you're a value relative because you can't know the truth, like some sort of quantum thing, like you can't see the quantum. It's impossible. Even if you have a microscope, you still couldn't see it. So if you want to argue that the value's there to be understood and dissected and recognized, it's just that we don't have the tools to do it, that's fine. But that's not what value relativists are saying. What they're saying is it's all made up. That there's no distinction between something of more credibility and something of lesser credibility. And that's just absolute nonsense. Just as big a pile of nonsense as to say value is not a reality, in spite of the obvious game-changing fundamental nature of sentience. To deny the existence of feelings and their qualitative character is just too ludicrous a position to hold and be called reasonable. Yeah, that's good enough. So, I think we're done. Yeah. Oh, look at that. Oh, that Christian's all over the place, isn't he? He had to post an old Luddite video. Oh, he's got to post Luddite's videos for him because Luddite lost his channel. Yeah, he deleted it. Yeah. So you'll post the videos for him. That's funny. But anyway, somebody, deliberately takes their videos down and you repost them for him. Strange. But whatever, it doesn't really matter. Oh, I didn't watch this. Every Inmendham video response ever. Let's see how funny this is. Har har.
Yeah, no, I wasn't making arguments in the video. I was just insulting you.
Oh, man. So I think it's all win for me. I mean, quite obviously that was his video. I was doing an imitation of him. So I thought it was an excellent imitation. I was totally fooled. I think I looked totally Mexican.
I was just insulting you.
Totally Mexican. Yeah. Okay, I'll stop with the Mexican jokes. It's just bullshit. Sorry, I said faggot in a video the other day. That was absolute bullshit. I'll do some penance. Throw a battery in the air and make it hit me in the head. Watch. Okay, I missed my head. But I'll do that. I'll throw some things in the air and hit myself in the head with them. I'll throw some things in the air and hit my... Oh, wait a minute, that's probably a good idea. Anyway, I'll do some kind of penance, okay? I know it's